This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
Have you checked the jobs report lately? If you don't know what that is, it's sort of like a monthly economic report card from the U.S. Department of Labor. It drops the first Friday of every month and explains things from what industries gained and lost jobs, and how many people were unemployed, to how much workers earned and how many hours they worked. And lately, the jobs report has shown some pretty alarming data. Unemployment among Black women aged 20 and older jumped from 5.1% in March to 6.7% in August. To make this feel a little more real, employment among Black women fell by roughly 318,000 jobs between February and June 2025. And Ofrunema Biu, chief economist and senior research director at the Maven Collaborative, says that's a serious issue.
Given the trends we've seen historically of Black folks being the first fired, and given that there's a slowdown in hiring, increasing in layoffs, unfortunately, the news was disheartening to see, but not a surprise.
These changes are what economists are calling a canary in the coal mine moment for the country's financial well-being.
Amid cuts to the federal workforce, where we know Black women are overrepresented, amid a destruction of DEI, where a lot of Black women are also represented, I'm not super surprised that this is taking place to Black women first.
That's Anna Gifty Opoku Ajiman, author of The Double Tax and a Harvard PhD candidate.
And honestly, really saddening, because a lot of these people are folks that we know, right? They're not just people who are floating somewhere else.
Today, we're sitting down with Anna and Ofrunema to take a hard look at the numbers, who these rising unemployment numbers affect, and why this moment could be an alarm for stormy economic seas ahead.
Corporate America owes Black women $50 billion in lost wages as of 2017.
Tell me where I can sign up for the rebate. Oh my gosh.
If you had to do that adjustment, we're talking billions upon billions.
Hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Anna, in a recent essay you co-wrote for Time magazine with sociologist Marianne Cooper, you posit that, to quote you, Black women are the canary in the economic coal mine. Why is that?
I think that it's because we sit at the axes of inequality, right? So if you're thinking about all the different groups that make up our country as sort of like overlapping circles in a Venn diagram, Black women are dead center, right? We're Black, we're women. We oftentimes are poor, middle class, working class, which is a good chunk of our country. We're highly educated, right? But also we have family members that we're taking care of, we're mothers. And all of these different aspects of who Black women are means that we can kind of see the tsunami coming before it reaches the shore. If these economic entities that are making policy decisions really paid attention to Black communities, they would have seen the housing crisis coming from a mile away, because those foreclosures were taking place already in the Black community, right? Especially Black and Latino communities. And we also know that Black women are more likely to get the worst end of the deal when it comes to loans, right? Subprime loans in particular. And then with COVID-19, we saw that Black women's unemployment skyrocketed to 16.8%, which is super high. For those who don't understand, right? 16.8% is wild, quite frankly. So you see these certain groups that are kind of almost alarm bells of, hey, there's a crisis on the way. And if we don't pay attention to those alarms, the actual crisis itself will reach our front doorstep.
So, Ofrunema, I mean, I see you nodding a lot throughout Anna's response, but how are you seeing these things play out? How do you see, or do you see Black women as the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the economy?
Yeah, I absolutely do see Black women as the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the economy. That's been the trend. When unemployment is up and labor market participation is down and employment is down for Black women, That's a sign for the rest of the economy. And also, when Black workers thrive, the U.S. economy is better overall, right? GDP is actually higher when there's less discrimination.
I'm sorry, that is not a statistic I've heard before. The GDP is higher when discrimination is lower?
Yeah, when there were efforts to reduce discrimination with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, we saw GDP went up. We saw better productivity. It can only be good for everyone when people have an opportunity to get the jobs that they want, that they're qualified for, by the way, and to have pay that allows them to sustain themselves and thrive.
Wow. Yeah, you kind of blew my mind with that. I mean, the idea that having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce drives up the nation's wealth, I mean, it runs directly counter to the government campaign we've seen against DEI initiatives in the workplace.
Yeah, it comes counter to the messaging, but that messaging is not rooted in fact.
I want to get into like what's kind of behind this. Why are Black women in particular experiencing these changes?
So there's a paper that came out in 2024. It's by Elizabeth Linos and her co-authors. And what they were looking at was sort of what happens with Black women's workplace outcomes when they're on predominantly white teams in corporate America. And what they find is that...
Sorry, I raised my eyebrows because the memories came flooding back, but go ahead.
Listen, what the paper ultimately concludes is that Black women face very unique workplace barriers when it comes to navigating retention and when it comes to sort of climbing the corporate ladder. And this outcome with respect to a higher share of white folks really impacting Black women's career outcomes is unique to Black women. No other group, at least from what the researchers found, are affected in this way.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to hear from you on this as well, Afranima. Like, what else have you seen in the data that might explain why Black women in particular are experiencing these changes in employment?
I think government jobs are a big part of the story. This administration promised to cut back on government employment and followed suit. Black women are disproportionately employed by the government. The government's been an important sector for Black women. It's one where there are fewer wage disparities. They're still there, but they're much fewer. There's more protections. There's more benefits in terms of health insurance, retirement coverage. There's even data that shows that Black women in government employment have better self-reported health outcomes.
Wow.
So with the decline in government employment and Black women being disproportionately in that type of work, that absolutely contributes to the rising unemployment rates for Black women.
Okay, so I want to hear more about that aspect. You know, what kinds of jobs or sectors are being affected most by these kinds of employment changes with Black women?
Physicians, dentists, lawyers, engineers. These are the types of jobs that are associated with economic mobility and financial freedom. Black women, we don't make up at least 7% of any of these jobs. And this is actually the opposite when we look at the lowest paid career paths. So childcare, we're talking about jobs in education, the kind of jobs that Femina had mentioned earlier on, right? These types of jobs, we have representation in 8 out of the 10 lowest paid jobs.
So I understand that we are overrepresented in some of these lower paying jobs, but we are also overrepresented in federal government jobs. I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, so, we know historically that presidents have played a role in sort of creating pathways in the federal government for Black individuals, specifically President Lyndon B. Johnson, right? So, through his initiatives under his administration, we saw an uptick in the number of Black folks who had employment in the federal government. And I also know that a lot of Black policymakers in recent years, as well as Black economists, have really pushed for sort of a federal jobs guarantee, right, to ensure that Black folks who oftentimes are left out of the labor force for a variety of reasons, at least have a guaranteed job in the government. So there's been multiple efforts, both historically and in the present, to get more Black people in government.
And as I understand it, these federal jobs affect workers across the country.
The cuts to the federal workforce have sort of a domino effect where it's like you're not just getting rid of the jobs in DC, but you're probably getting rid of the jobs in Kentucky as a result, because those folks are also relying on those federal agencies to be upheld or those contracts to be honored in full.
Yeah. And, there's an overall phenomenon called occupational crowding that looks at not just the fact that people are segregated into the jobs, but they're segregated despite being qualified for something better. So looking at what types of education is required for different occupations, who's in them, we see that Black women are indeed overrepresented or crowded into lower paying occupations that have fewer benefits. Also occupations that are more likely to be associated with temporary work, one of the less beneficial forms of alternative work arrangements that has even fewer protections and the lowest pay. So this is something that already exists on top of these unemployment increases that we're seeing. Black women already being in a vulnerable position in the workforce. And on top of that, these increases in layoffs and slowdowns in hiring. Overall, this will have a compounding impact, I'm sure, with this loss of income, especially the role that Black women have in their communities and families.
Okay. So that makes me think about another aspect in all of this. Black women aren't just the first demographic to be affected by economic downturn, but they're also often the last to recover after the economy bounces back. Why is that?
Yeah, I think it's the same reason why we are often the first to suffer when the economy isn't doing well. So when employers have a choice of who to hire, when the economy starts to recover, unfortunately, Black folks, certainly Black women, are among the last to be considered for that.
Yeah. And to that point, it makes me even more devastated by a statistic I heard recently, which is that according to the National Women's Law Center, the average time Black women spent unemployed before they found a job again after losing a job was more than 6 months, the longest duration of any demographic group. Coming up,
if it's not addressed in our generation, the next generation is going to have to deal with those costs alongside the costs that they're facing, given the context that they're being born into.
Stay with us.
This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better, like cutting their own hair or forgetting sunscreen, so now you look like a tomato. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it. Learn more at schwab.com.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR.
This message comes from Jackson. Let's face it, retirement planning can be confusing. At Jackson, we're working to make retirement clear for everyone, starting with you. Our easy-to-understand resources and user-friendly digital tools help simplify your entire experience. You can have confidence in your retirement with clarity from Jackson. Seek the clarity you deserve at jackson.com. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York. This message comes from LPL Financial. What if you could have more control over your future? LPL Financial removes the things holding you back and provides the services to push you forward. Because when it comes to your finances, your business, your future, LPL Financial believes the only question should be, what if you could? LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal.
I also just want to touch on false narratives that are out there about Black women, which I think contributes to some of what we're seeing. So this idea that Black women lack motivation, when in reality, Black women have higher labor force participation generally than other groups of women. You'll find us, as Anna was talking about, supporting our families, working against just tremendous odds. I think that is a continued narrative, a myth that is important to talk about and expose.
You know, it's interesting. Going back to the point that you made about having what sounds like a stronger social safety net for people who cannot participate in the economy as workers. I mean, you know, we talked about a lot of doubles in this conversation. And according to the Brookings Institute, Black mothers are more likely to be juggling the double shift of unpaid and paid labor. And due to many of the factors we've already mentioned, they are also less able to turn to some of the contingency plans available to other mothers, like working from home, taking a break from employment, or outsourcing childcare.
Yeah. And when you think about the cost of childcare, how can you participate and have a job when you have young children and then the childcare is so expensive? How it's just not feasible.
Right? Because what's happening is a lot of people are leaving the workforce to take care of their loved ones.
Oh, it's true. I was going to say women broadly are exiting the workforce and not coming back.
All racial backgrounds. That's exactly right.
Oh, and then you could be setting yourself up for another caregiving crisis for your future forebears, right? Because when you leave the workforce, those retirement contributions leave as well.
The double tax compounds. If it's not addressed in our generation, the next generation is going to have to deal with those costs alongside the costs that they're facing, given the context that they're being born into.
Okay, all right, we got a lot laid out on the table right now, so I wanna looking forward, right, or even figuring out how to address this moment, knowing what we do about Black women's current unemployment challenges. What should we be doing, both as workers and as a country, to prevent more economic strife? Afronima?
Yeah. I think locally and statewide, just shoring up other supportive services, whether it's unemployment insurance programs. There's areas that have experimented with guaranteed income, which is shown to have incredibly positive impacts on families and those recipients of those programs. So I think that is one thing. I would say more broadly, we know unions are certainly important. It can help in these situations. And in fact, union coverage is more common among government workers, which is why it's so much more devastating that these government cuts have happened and impacted all these workers, including Black women. Union coverage has been shown to reduce wage disparities by race and gender in jobs. They give more protections for workers who are at risk of being fired. But unfortunately, union coverage has declined substantially in the last few decades. There's local laws, state laws, these right-to-work states that are making it even harder for people to participate in unions. And where collective bargaining doesn't exist, temp workers or independent contractors, you don't have access to unions. Being in community with others, having that communication, mutual aid of sorts, whether it's about how we can work together to preserve our jobs or to save money or to provide support to each other. I think all those things are certainly important.
And Anna, what about you?
Maybe the one thing I'll add to this is that we as Black women should be really audacious in our asks when it comes to the opportunities that come along our way. This is the work of Dr. Michelle Holder, who has coined the double gap, right? This idea that corporate America owes Black women $50 billion in lost wages as of 2017.
Oh my
right? So
gosh.
2017, this is what she found.
Tell me where I can sign up for the rebate. Oh my gosh.
If you had to do that adjustment, we're talking billions upon billions, right? And so Black people more broadly are penalized at times for trying to negotiate our salary. But this is why it's important to the point that was made earlier about community, right? If you know there's a Black person who's applying to your job, you should be double clicking and making sure that they're getting more than what you were even offered, right? Even having a conversation with other Black women about how much you're making, what kind of benefits you're getting. And this also goes down to if they let you go, your severance package is something that can be negotiated, right? So making sure that all of these things in tandem are happening in communities so that you are not losing out on your livelihood because these people want to shortchange you and lowball you to the pits of hell.
Yeah. And in that report that I worked on last year on Black women in alternative or non-standard work and different types of vulnerable work arrangements, we also did some interviews with Black women who were in those roles. And not surprisingly, Black women are resilient. They did so much despite being in some of these less stable jobs to stay afloat, whether that was saving money, clipping coupons, relying on community. All those things were important and showed that they had the tools and the strategies to ensure their well-being. but also needed that social safety net. So I also learned how important it was that they had Medicaid coverage, which, is in jeopardy right now, to the tune of trillions, for themselves and for their children, that they had access to SNAP for food. All those things in combination of what they were able to do is really important and will continue to be, especially in this time.
Oh my gosh. Well, Anna, Afranima, I thank you both so much for this conversation. You've given me a lot to think about just in terms of myself, but also you've shed so much light on a topic that I think a lot of people have been perhaps misunderstanding. So thank you both so much.
Likewise.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
That was Afranima Biyu, Chief Economist and Senior Research Director at the Maven Collaborative, and Anna Gifty Opoku Ajiman, author of The Double Tax and a Harvard PhD candidate. You can read more about their research in our show notes. And I'm going to put on my influencer hat for a second and ask you to please subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. Click follow so you know the latest in culture while it's still hot. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Nina Pathak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor 1Password. Protect your digital life with 1Password. If you're tired of family members constantly texting you for the passwords to streaming services, 1Password lets you securely share or remove access to logins. Access from any device, anytime. 1Password lets you securely switch between iPhone, Android, Mac, and PC with convenient features like autofill for quick sign-ins. Right now, get a free 2-week trial for you and your family at 1password.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Capella University. With Capella's FlexPath learning format, you can set your own deadlines and learn on your schedule. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.